Don't buy a co-op apartment in New York City in 2025. I bet that if you're looking to buy a place, you may have heard that advice. And guess what? I don't disagree. If a co-op purchase truly is not the right kind of purchase for you. And how do you know that? Well, that's what we're going to discuss today. And I promise you, if you stay around to the end of this video, you're going to have a good, solid understanding and a list of cons and reasons why that purchase may not be the right purchase or may be the right purchase for you in New York City. I'm Dewey Moss. I'm your New York City real estate resource. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button, and let's get started. Buyers often come to the market in New York City and have heard horror stories about buying a co-op, and some of those stories are true. I will tell you that I myself own a co-op, and I have helped countless people buy and sell co-ops in New York City. So if it were truly that awful of a process, it wouldn't happen on a daily basis. So let me help you put that concern aside. But with that said, that does not mean that a co-op is the right purchase for you, because there are some things that you need to be very aware of when you're purchasing into a co-op so that you don't find these things out later on down the line and wish you had not made that purchase. So let's talk about a few of those things. Now, if you're looking to buy in New York City, we're really talking about three different property types. We're talking about full townhomes, we're talking about condo apartments, and we're talking about co-op apartments. For the purpose of this discussion, we're going to leave townhomes out of it. That's a completely different buying process. So really, you're choosing between buying a condo and buying a co-op. Those are really your two options if you're looking to buy an apartment in New York City. So the first thing that you have to understand about not buying a co-op in New York City is that you have to be okay with looking at limited inventory in limited areas of town. So what do I mean by that? Well, co-ops make up about 80 to 85% of the entire inventory in New York City. That's a huge amount of buildings that are co-ops. And so if you don't want to look at co-ops, that's fine. That means that you're going to be looking at only 15% of the inventory that's really out there for sale. For example, on the Upper West Side, all those beautiful brownstones and beautiful old pre-war buildings, those tend to be co-ops, not condos. There aren't a lot of condos on the Upper West Side in comparison to the rest of the neighborhoods in New York City. So if you're looking for that kind of feel, chances are you're not going to find a condo that you would like on the Upper West Side. But if you're looking, say, in the Lincoln Square area, behind Lincoln Center and in that Midtown area, there are quite a number of condos. So a lot of it depends on where you want to live and the kind of lifestyle that you want to live and the kind of building that you want to live in, whether or not a co-op or a condo is going to be right for you. But condos definitely are a bit restricted to certain neighborhoods. If you think about it only being 15% of the inventory, then obviously it's going to be a little bit more scattered inventory across Manhattan than what co-ops are. So you need to be clear about that and understand that you're going to be looking at a limited inventory. Now, there's a major difference between condos and co-ops that really does bother some people. With a condo, you are purchasing the actual apartment within that building. It is real property and it is subject to property taxes and the common charges of the building. It is just like owning a little house that is sitting in the neighborhood, and that neighborhood is the building. It is real property. With a co-op, you are buying shares into the shareholder-owned company that then owns the building. The whole history of co-ops is very interesting. This is a way for when owners of the buildings wanted to sell the buildings that renters could get together and actually purchase the building. But you are not the owner of real property. You do not actually own the apartment. You own shares, and those shares are assigned to a proprietary lease for that particular apartment that allows you to live in the apartment. So don't be confused about renting. You're not renting. You have a proprietary lease connected to the shares that you have purchased. So for some people, they want to be able to own real property and have some of the benefits that go along with owning real property that aren't necessarily there for you in a co-op. Now, Do they feel any different? Of course not. If you're living in a co-op, then you're going to feel like that's your home, that's your apartment. People aren't going to be able to come into the apartment and do things without your permission. You're still going to have a lovely home. As I said, so much of the inventory here in New York City are co-ops. So people live happily in co-ops every day. But if you want to have real property, then you're going to need to consider having a condo purchase only. Now, both condos and co-ops have building rules. You're not really going to be able to get past any of those building rules. You're living in a neighborhood. You're living in a vertical neighborhood that has its own rules. But inevitably, there are a lot more rules when it comes to co-op buildings. One of the things that people aren't prepared for is that co-op boards set the amount of down payment that you must pay to be able to buy into that building. That's usually around 20% of the purchase price. It can be 25%. It can be 40%. It could ultimately be 50% in some buildings in Manhattan. Not a lot, but a few. Now, the board is made up of your neighbors, their other shareholders, and they set what they think they want to see in terms of equity being invested into the company and therefore invested into your property. So for a lot of people, they don't want to have that dictated. Now, the difference here is that condos also dictate how much you should put down, but it is less of a down payment. It's usually 10%. So you're going to have 10% versus 20%, maybe 30%, maybe 40%, depending on what building and neighborhoods you're looking in. Either way, you have a larger down payment than what you would if you were a first-time home buyer, for example, out in the rest of the nation. So you have to be prepared for that, but some people really don't want to have to pay that much amount of money down to a co-op. There's no way around it. Whatever the co-op says must be paid down in order for you to purchase into a co-op. So that may not be right for you, but it is a big consideration. Now, some buyers come to New York City and they think, well, I've heard that New York City is a good real estate investment, so I want to do that. And I'm going to live here maybe 1 or 2 years before I go somewhere else and get another job and move on with my life. But I want to keep the apartment as an investment property because I hear the rents are so high in New York City. All of that is true. But understand, a co-op board and many co-ops do not allow you to have the unit solely as an investment unit. Many of the co-op boards have rules that say you have to live there for 3 years and then you can only rent for 2, and then you'd have to live there again as a primary residence for another 3 years. Or maybe that's the entirety of the ability to rent. You can only rent for 2 years during the entire time that you own the co-op. Now, this is not true for every co-op building. As I said, every board makes its own rules. So are there co-ops that allow unlimited subletting? Absolutely. Are they more rare than not? Absolutely. So if you are solely looking for an investment unit and you know that you're going to want to keep something or buy something and immediately use it as an investment unit, then condo is the right purchase for you. Co-ops, you really shouldn't consider. Kind of in the same vein, many people come here and they own houses or properties in other areas of the nation, and they want to have a second residence here in New York City, partly because they just want to live part-time in New York City, or perhaps they come here for work and then go back home. That's great. We call those pied-à-terres, and there are many, many pied-à-terres in the city. However, you have to understand that not every co-op allows pied-à-terres. Co-ops, by their nature, being shareholders that live in the building, are set up to form a very strong community. So they're not necessarily looking to have people come and go or leave their apartments empty for long periods of time. However, there are many buildings that allow pied-à-terres and co-ops, but you have to understand which ones do and which ones don't. So it's an awful thing to fall in love with a building, to fall in love with the apartment, saying, that's it, that's a dream apartment, and just find out that they will not allow pied-à-terres, and that's one of your requirements. And no, you cannot get past that. You can't pretend otherwise. Co-ops will find out. So you need to make sure that you're working with very experienced buyers buyer's agent who understands which buildings would allow pied-à-terres and help guide you, or stick to purchasing a condo because nobody cares if that's a first residence or a second residence, or if you're keeping that as an investment unit. As I said earlier, you can do most anything you want to with a condo. There are tax implications about keeping a pied-à-terre as your second residence as opposed to your primary. All of that is something that you would discuss with your accountant and make some decisions. But if you're solely looking for a pied-à-terre, you may be better off thinking about condos, but definitely making sure that the co-op buildings will allow pied-à-terres. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of rules in co-ops, and there are a lot of rules in co-ops, and many people have problems with this. Now, are there rules in condo buildings? Of course there are. There are building rules, house rules in condos that you're going to have to abide by. But there are so many more levels of rules in a co-op, and some people are not good with that. They don't like being dictated what they can or cannot do to their property, even though you don't own real property in a co-op. Remember, that is the key. But most of the rules in a co-op are designed to keep the building healthy. Because remember, you are part of a company that owns and maintains that building. If the building falls into poor health, either financially or structurally, then guess who's responsible for that? All of the shareholders. So most of the rules truly are designed to try to keep the building healthy, both financially and structurally, and provide a really beautiful living situation for all of the shareholders. With that said, can it be frustrating to want to do some sort of renovation to your apartment and be told either you have to submit extensive architect designs, or maybe the board just says, no, we can't allow that, and perhaps it's a difficult board and they're just being a little stubborn and don't want to allow those kind of renovations? Absolutely. All of that is immensely frustrating. Does it happen in every building? Of course not. Again, I will say 80 to 85% of all the inventory in New York City are co-ops. If it was that difficult to own a co-op, if it was that difficult to do the kinds of things that you want to do to your apartment in a co-op, then nobody would buy co-ops, and we simply would not have a co-op market in New York City. Now, contrary to that, on a condo, you want to do some renovations, you still need to consult with the board, but they probably won't say no. They don't have the power to tell you what you can do with your real property. That's like someone out in the rest of the nation telling someone what they can and can't do with their house. Now, there are neighborhoods that have home rules, homeowner associations, and maybe your mailbox has to be a certain color, that sort of thing. That kind of thing is kind of like living in a co-op in New York City. You do have to abide by those rules, but co-op boards do have the majority of the power to make decisions that they think are going to maintain the building, and sometimes that does not align with shareholders' expectations or desires for renovation and to do other things with their apartment. So if you are naturally a rule breaker and sort of rail against rules in the establishment, perhaps a co-op is not the best purchase for you. You'll be much better off considering a condo. Okay, there you have it. Those are some good, strong reasons why you would consider just the condo over a co-op. As I said, the goal of this video really isn't to say don't buy a co-op. It's to help you understand if a co-op is the right purchase for you when you're coming into the New York City market. I would love to help you make that decision and give you some further guidance, so please take a look at all the different ways you can get in touch with me. And please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you can stay up to date on all the videos that we release on this channel. And I'll see you next time.